So, hi everyone, it's Pavel Kravchenko. I said that we are trying to bring cutting edge knowledge to our audience and the best experts, and to allow them to tell about what they do. And this time we have Winston Yong, executive architect from IBM. And IBM is doing a lot in blockchain and doing it for a long time and do it this very systemic approach. And we definitely want to hear what you guys are doing. And we will have questions to Winston. But now I want Winston to introduce himself and tell a little bit more about his background and everything. So Winston, please tell us about yourself.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation to speak to all of you on this call. And I hope that I have met some of you last year already at your conference. So I have been working with IBM for close to 10 years. And before this, I have been working in the banking industry as well as the aviation industry. I am the chief architect for blockchain services in Europe. And I also specialize in all forms of emerging technology. So today, I'm here to speak to you about travel and transportation in the context of blockchain, but I will also speak with you on other topics that you may be interested to ask me about. So looking forward to our Q&A. But for the moment, I am happy to have this conversation with you, Pavel. And how would you like our conversation to continue?
Yeah, I would like, just as we agreed initially, you can talk about the use cases that you see are promising, that IBM is working now and that you are involved personally. Would be interested to hear which problems do you see the technology solves that wasn't possible to solve in the past, how it affects the efficiency, how it affects the maybe cost reductions, and etc. etc. So please just tell us about these projects.
Sure. May I ask someone who's controlling the host to let me share the screen? And what I'll do is I will show you some of the projects that IBM is doing. So IBM has been working on a lot of blockchain projects, as you can imagine. We have been taking a focus on it since the last 4 years. And we started off doing a lot of proof of concept and prototypes naturally as people start to get a grip with it. But after doing about 700-800 projects already, we're now stopped counting how many projects that we're doing. We've just been doing so many, and the change has been quite significant too, because we've started to see centers of gravity form in certain areas. So if I may now just show you where we are going to.
While you're sharing, I've heard that more than 1,000 people are working inside IBM on Hyperledger and related projects. Is it true?
Yes, we do have a lot of people working on it. So depending on how you count, IBM is a very big company. So we have almost 1,000. Well, not as many as 1,000 who are full-time on blockchain. So I think about closer to 500, which is dedicated to blockchain. And what we find is blockchain projects don't just use blockchain people. So we have a lot of UI developers, integration developers, database guys, cloud architects. And so these are people that we draw into our project to work on blockchain projects. So by the time you count the people who actually have experience working on blockchain, then it is way more than 1,000 people. But it is a smaller team that focuses on it all the time.
Okay, and just another random question is we all know that 2017 and 18 was really like a hype period for blockchain. where everybody was jumping inside, and then 19 and 20s is not that hot for blockchain. And do you see the like slowing down the processes within the IBM, or you just still believe in this and invest like was?
So in terms of the amount of business that we are doing in monetary terms, that has been growing a lot. Right? In Europe alone, we have grown to about 40% just last year.
Okay.
However, in the amount of projects that we are doing less projects because each of the projects are getting larger and larger, which comes to the point that I was just mentioning, that we have noticed that there are centers of gravity starting to form around the industries. Where are people actually doing blockchain project? So you will see at the bottom right-hand side, yes, we are still doing financial services. There are payment rails that are related to it, trade finance. It is still hot in financial services. However, we are seeing much more activity in consumer goods and energy and utility as well. So we have very large consumer goods, and I'm not here to do a pitch on our products, but you would have known that IBM has invested heavily in IBM Food Trust. And that is something that we are working on with a lot of clients. So we have many, many clients who are signing in. And true to the nature of a blockchain, when one party joins in manufacturing, you're bringing all your suppliers on with you. So we are getting a lot of traction inside there when we're monitoring the supply chain and doing work. And I have shown some of the people from Distributed Labs, some of the work we're doing with Carrefour, where you are able to scan a QR code, and within less than a second, you will have the entire provenance of that product displayed on your mobile phone. So those are things that are very much what we do, and it is very focused around consumer goods, and it's giving us a lot of business. The other one in energy and utility, you can look out for our latest client to go live, which is called Equigi. It's in the public sector, public space. You can see what we have done in terms of grid balancing to be able to take extra energy on the grid and sell it to electric car owners who will charge up their cars using the smart contracts that are inside blockchain to buy energy when it is cheap. And then when there is a demand on the grid who goes up, the energy provider goes to all the electric car owners and offer to buy the energy back from their batteries. And it becomes a win-win situation. And we have just gone live with this. And to your question, Pavel, this is what I mean by things have gone into production. And it is just one project there for Equigi, but the size of the project means that it implements all the consumers in Netherlands and now Germany, where they can access this. So all the electric car owners in Netherlands and Germany can access this. That's the size of the projects that we're doing. I think also very interestingly, when you're ready to explore, I'll be happy to talk to you about travel and transport and what we're doing inside there as well. But generally, these are the 4 areas that we see where the focus on blockchain has been.
Okay, interesting. And before we proceed, could you express your opinion about how deeply the end customer should be involved in these processes, and how good they should understand the blockchain technology inside, or they should just use it as a normal application and don't need to bother themselves with technical details?
The end customer. There are 2 types of end customers that we would refer to. You can have the consumer. These are people who would use it in your mobile app. And these are people that don't really need to know about blockchain. And for them, blockchain is a distributed ledger. And like a ledger, it's accounting that sits in the back office. And therefore, they would just say, that's a very easy way to do things. Yes, I will use it. Therefore, they don't need to know about how blockchain works as a consumer. However, as an end user, as in the business context, that you are the business owner for trying to roll out that new app that does grid balancing on your electric car with electricity, or rolling out the new form of intermodal ticket that is one ticket that spans across an airline and a train company. As the business owner, yes, you do need to know about blockchain, because you have to understand it enough to assure your customers, the end consumers, that it is secure and you know what you're doing. So from that perspective, as an end user, the business end user, yes, so we do make sure that they know how blockchain works. Some need to know about it from a technical point of view, like the IT department, but others, like the business users, would be more interested in the governance of blockchain.
Okay, this is a very interesting topic. And if you allow me, I will just ask a few more questions.
Sure.
Around here. So first of all, when you say they need to understand blockchain in order to assure the end customers about like the new level of trust, and what exactly meant here? Do they need to validate the digital signature, or do they need to like see the consensus like mechanism and see how blocks are closed, or do they need to validate smart contracts, or what?
They need to be able to understand it to a point that they can explain it to someone else on what is actually happening inside there. So for example, let's take the example that I just spoke about in the electric car and the energy grid provider. Someone in the energy grid provider needs to be able to understand how smart contract works, because that is all about pricing mechanism in the smart contract. If price drops below this amount, or if my energy supply goes beyond, how can I offer it out to my customers? And who are my customers? And for us in blockchain, they need to be able to understand, is a customer a single node, or is it just multiple customers into a node? How do I organize my organizations? How many smart contracts will I need to have? Is it one per customer, or is it one per electrical substation? So that's the extent of knowing how smart contract works in a business context. From an IT perspective, someone is going to ask also, how secure is it? Is this hackable? Am I giving you my data, or is my data sitting on my ledger? So the IT department needs to be able to understand and explain it to their customer that distributed ledger means that each customer has their own ledger and they control their own data, and no one else can actually see it. So that's the extent of knowledge that each of the business users need to have in order to convince their customers and give them a level of comfort.
And here, when they convince, like, do they say, oh, it is your database which is synchronized real time with the others, or this is the database where the cryptography applies and data that is signed? So I just want to understand on which level they are like communicating when saying that everything is secure. Because you can say, oh, it's IBM, trust the data that comes from IBM. And everybody will say, yeah, they will trust the IBM. Or they say it's like somebody from Big Four, they like big company and licensed and etc. So they could be a data provider or Bloomberg or whatever. So it just, you can outsource the trust. And that was the only method in the old world or you could only rely on the brand name, and now we have to rely on some technical mechanisms. So are we really changing the mentality of people and saying, okay, now you rely on technology that is like works in that way?
Yes, it is very true. So we are actually changing the way customers behave. And let me give you an example from the work we're doing. And it just illustrates the point that the trust is a funny thing and it's not linear. When we were doing a project and we were doing sizing of the system and say, okay, if I have how many hits onto the blockchain network, how do I actually account for the non-functional requirements of the volumetrics and the latency of reply? So we were scaling it out to make sure that when we put a product inside there and then the customer walks into a shop and starts scanning it, every time it will hit the blockchain network. So we were providing size of it to be able to grow large as we put more and more products in and more consumers use it. So we scaled it large. We learned a lesson when we actually did trials out with the customers. Customers are not linear. So what we found is that there was an uptake in the volume metrics as people got to know, that's a blockchain assured product. So if I scan the QR code on that product, I can get all the blockchain provenance on it. And I know exactly where, like for example, my food has come from. Where has this chicken come from? Or where has this beef come from? Is it halal? So all of this I could find out by just scanning the QR code, and on my mobile phone, I can see the result. So if you imagine how many times customers walk into the shops and then how many shops there are, it could be a very big hit. We found that the number of hits just went up as expected. And then after a while, it flatlined and then started to drop. But the sales of the product continued to rise dramatically. So what was happening? We realized that people had built up the trust and no longer need to hit the network every time. So if you go into the shop and you have product X and you scan it for the first time, this one is fresh. Okay, very good. I will put it in my shopping basket. I will pay for it. The next few times you go in there, you may still scan it. But by the fifth time you're going in there, do you really need to scan it? Or you have already built up a trust? And then we saw that the volume metrics actually declining. So that's just an example to say that, you know, when you build up trust, it can happen in many different ways.
It's interesting because if we talk about the future, like machine-to-machine payments, and when machines will pick up our food for us, machines don't have the trust. So people know that this particular shop employed the system, and a person can look at the QR code. It's like an OG.
Yes, I know we are diverting from the topic of travel and transport, but because I mean, I said I would happy to go where you take the conversation, right? And now you're talking on another favorite topic of mine, the intersection between blockchain and artificial intelligence. So what we are building is we're a system where we have the ability to pick up very small transactions, right? In particular, it was the energy from photovoltaic cells, so solar panels. Solar panels that generate electricity. But one other benefit of a solar panel is that it is eco-friendly, and therefore you can harvest carbon credits from it. How much carbon did you offset through your solar cell? So there are systems inside that go out and harvest this from solar panels. One of our clients wanted to test, is it possible to pick up 200,000 transactions every 10 hours? Every 10 hours, a ping through the 2G network to pick up how much solar power has been generated of each of these devices. And there are 200,000 devices inside there. So imagine how are you going to verify all of these transactions? How do you know that the guy in one of the solar panel didn't just disconnect his solar panel and actually plug it into a diesel engine just to be able to generate the carbon credits?
Mm-hmm.
How do you tell that? So what we are working on now is artificial intelligence to be able to scan through and look at patterns, to be able to say, this guy has been putting in consistently how much energy distribution every day for the last 6 months. When I map another layer on top and I say, I put weather patterns on top, I can actually tell which days it's cloudy because it is raining. And therefore, energy needs to drop down. And then I'm able to pick up exceptions. So if someone is very consistent, the power never drops down, even though it is cloudy and people not generating solar power, then we say something is unusual there. Use artificial intelligence, pick it up, then go and do an investigation. So that's how you can start to use emerging technology to work to the benefit of very high levels of transactions.
Interesting.
Yeah, as you can tell, that I'm very passionate about some of these things.
So you're replacing, in certain cases, you're replacing the formal verification via pattern analysis, and so you don't need to formally verify certain data, but rather like.
Do I need? It's like trying to say, do I need to verify you every time, or because you have been validated for so long, you have built up a higher level of trust, and because of the higher level of trust, I don't validate you as often? So these are new ways of working, which are being introduced, which we can harvest artificial intelligence to help us to make things work. And then we build up patterns of analysis. And it is no different really to how banks are today trying to do fraud detection. They are using these patterns of analysis, and what we're doing is bringing it back into technologies like blockchain.
And basically blockchain helps here in a way that you have access to immutable history of past events.
Exactly. And if I know a lot of you are more technically minded in this audience here. So if we take something like Hyperledger Fabric, which has a world state, what you're able to do is just check on the world state. If the world state changes significantly or you want to investigate, then only you drill down through to the chain itself to rebuild the chain and look at full provenance. But otherwise, you could always use a world state as a set of, call it a metadata, which allows you to very quickly query at a high level before needing to drill down.
Okay, and another side question that I wanted to ask, and we have two people asking in the chat, is what is the unique value proposition of blockchain for business within IBM's opinion? So how would you describe the Hyperledger uniqueness?
And that is where at least I am telling people that the business value doesn't start with explaining the technology. The business value starts with explaining what is the problem that is being solved. Right? So always start there and you will get a better answer. And in that case, then it is just about, is the Hyperledger Fabric more efficient, or is it Coda that is more efficient, or is it Ethereum? And then it just becomes a tool. But as we all know, the value of a tool is in whose hands it is. In the hands of a master craftsman, even the poorest of tools can generate an object of beauty. So let me tell you a little bit more, if I may now, to take some examples here. So in the travel and transport, we'll always start with examining what is the business value of the problem that we're trying to solve. In this case here, we know that people travel a lot. Yes, we are in a lockdown situation here today, and there is a lot less travel. But in the grand scheme of things will go back to a little bit more normal, and people will start traveling again. And there is 10.5 trillion contributing to global travel. When you're living in a city, you have to travel through one of these transports. That you can't just rely on walking. Even cycling, you need a bicycle to do it. And 50% of the world's population is in urban cities. Mobile phones, subscription, that's a level of measure how technically savvy we are and how much we can actually do with our smartphones. So the problem is always the value is always stated in context with the problem that we're having. And in this case here, it is about the silos. So if you imagine now, you wanting to go and travel from point A to point B, and you need to rent a bicycle, catch an Uber, go to the train station, arrive at the airport, arrive at the destination, take another Uber, get to a hotel. You have actually gone through many, many tickets. And you would have had to buy each one of them. But what happens when there's a delay and you miss connection? Whose responsibility is it? And what if I misplace a ticket? How many tickets do I need to have? So just excuse me. So that is the problem that we have tried to tackle with blockchain, with mobility, to be able to have a single ticketing platform that goes through the whole process. When we did this, we didn't try to solve the whole problem at once. So if you look here at the travel journey, everybody starts a journey by planning your route, making a reservation, then issuing the ticket before you travel. Where we're focused on for the most value is here, creating the ticket and making the travel. So we've created a system which we're calling Passepartout, and this is something that is a B2B system. So we have clients that are at the moment joining up to do market tests, where when they join in, they're able to define travel segments. And these travel segments are not yet the ticket. They are just routes to be able to fly from Stuttgart to Amsterdam, to be able to fly from Kiev to London, right? These are just routes. And who hand contract? So I can have an airline contracting with a train company so that someone could travel by train from outside of Kiev into Kiev, then to get onto an airplane, fly, arrive in Heathrow, then take another train from Heathrow up to Manchester. We could do all of that and issue one contract, one price, and the first person who issues the ticket collects all the money. And that's where we then have this purchase, and we have to be able to account for it. The person who collected the money, let's say the first ticket that was sold was for the train, and the person who sold the train ticket also sold the air ticket and all, and into one ticket. He needs to tell the airline that I have sold this air ticket. You can carry that person. And when you carry that person, I'm going to take your share of the money and give it to you. How do we know that that person has been carried? So we have the checking of fares. And as you can see now with mobile phones, just a scan of the QR code, scan of your boarding pass, I can validate to say, yes, I, the airline, can prove to you that I have carried this passenger. Now pay me my money. And then he makes a claim for it. So this is a system that we have built for intermodal ticketing. Where we've started with is actually at the back room and concentrated on the value of the money, making money that has been collected much more efficient in going to the people who are supposed to have it. That's how we have found the value in this intermodal ticketing, not focusing on the end consumer and saying that we can find you a better price for an airline ticket if you help use us to compare it between a few different airlines, and I route you through Minsk to go to London would be cheaper. We didn't do that. We just focus on removing friction. Mm-hmm. How do people trust you that I can allow someone to sell my ticket, that after they have collected the money, they will pay me for it when I carry that passenger.
And the question, maybe it's like just intermediary question, and how do you see the IBM's role? Only provider of the infrastructure, or providing some kind of insurance between all the like ticket providers? Because yeah, as you mentioned, the connection may be missed, and somebody has to pay for that, and yeah, insure all the risks.
So IBM is a technology firm, and that will be the first thing that we provide inside here. That it not just the infrastructure, right? So we provide a lot of the business service to do the work. Every time that all these contracts and tickets get issued, it isn't just someone keying it in all over again. We are doing machine-to-machine integration. The reservation system passes to the ticketing system, that over the last 1 minute, I have sold how many tickets, or I have made how many reservations. Now I'm waiting for the money to come in. That's an interface, all right? So we have all of these integration work that needs to be done. It goes back to what I told you at the beginning of the call, that when we do blockchain projects, we have a lot of other people who are non-chain code developers who are working on the project, such as integration work. So we do a lot of that. We also do business value design, which is how we calculate the value, the assessment, to be able to calculate a business case, for example. So in this case here, we have already calculated and determined that the best place to start for our clients, in this case, was to start at the back and deal with the ticketing problem. How we arrived at that is a set of analysis that our consultants would have done.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a long way of answering your question, but the short of it is that no, we won't do insurance. We will always be focused around the technology provision of it. Even though at times it is peripheral, for example, such as doing integration work and also doing business value assessment.
Okay, so you actually provide some consultancy.
Oh, yes. Of course. And that is very much my job. I'm the chief architect for blockchain services. So it is very much my job to make sure that the appropriate level of services are put into place. And one of the, and I know many of you are architects and technical people here, as I am. So one of my principles of engagement is always to make sure that the conventional technology is reused. So we don't all go in and say, we will always replace whatever you have. The truth is that the client has always made an investment how are you going to help the client protect their investment? By reusing it. So we would not replace their system of records, but we will integrate to it. And they will be the system that pumps in the data for ingestion into our blockchain network. So in this case here, it'll be the reservation and the ticketing system that is pumping in information. When the information comes in from the airport, that they've scanned all the boarding passes, they are all integrated through to the back end. So a lot of our projects right now it's not necessary to have a front-end user interface, because we will use back the client's existing mobile app and user interface. So it becomes very much a in the background system-to-system integration, where the APIs that we construct are the critical part of integration.
Okay, so it's API-driven design, and your focus is on that.
Yes, very much so.
Okay, and my next question would be, you basically building this type of infrastructures, you need a few layers to be fully ready or so. And this is the layer of blockchain core and the layer of middleware that connects different business logic, etc. And what would you say requires the immediate focus of business right now?
Oh, that's a hard one to answer, but let's put up here a technical overview, and we use our case study to investigate a little bit more. So what we've been talking about is the importance of this integration layer here. That is very crucial, because that will provide that connectivity between your channel, whether it could be coming through a mobile device or ticket scanner. It will go through your REST APIs and any data transformation. The workflow management can play a crucial part, but it's very much dependent on the use case that you're going through. Does it need a lot of routing inside? And when I say routing, it's not about network routing. It is about workflow routing. Who are the users? Do I need to send this for approval? Do I need my boss to check on my work before it gets put onto the blockchain itself and it gets ingested? So a little bit less priority here, but over here, these are all standard services that you would want all of them to have equal level of importance. What we're also seeing is that at the data level, whilst we have started by putting everything onto Ledger, right now, the off-chain data is becoming more important, so that we can make sure that the latency and the response time of the blockchain network is not compromised as more and more data build up. And for example, what I told you about using artificial intelligence when they need to look at unstructured data, we keep a lot of that off-chain, so that the artificial intelligence can consume much more data, overlay it, and then query the ledger states inside. So that's a lot of work and importance that we see, trying to find the design where you split between ledger and off-chain data.
I have two short questions here. It is interesting that you separated the ledger from the blockchain platform. And I would actually agree that the data, even if it's organized according to blockchain principles, is something external to blockchain, because blockchain provides you with relations between data and not the data itself. Yes. So maybe you have special some comments on that, why it's different in here.
And this would flow back from the way that we work. We always work with our client and say, what is the business problem? And the business problem never starts itself by telling you, I need to be data that gets stored on the ledger. It's never like that. And so if you have a very wide-ranging scope of work, then you will realize that there are many different type of data that that needs to be consulted. Some are transactional data, which we can put into ledger, and a lot of these are analytical data, which doesn't necessarily go into blockchain inside. Hence, we need to separate. So my advice for any of my consultants and architects that I'm training is always start with the data architecture to find out how big a scope that you've got to build. Because if I did not do that correctly, and I just build the data to handle the prototype, I will find that when I want to scale it, I have missed out other things. Let me take an example of a project that we did. And the client wanted to track cars. And they said, how do I track a car? What is the unique identifier for a car? And then he said, I moved the car around. The vehicle identification number, the VIN number. So every car has a 17-digit VIN number engraved into the car. I will use that as my identifier. And it became fantastic. It worked. But later, when we found that the prototype was successful and we wanted to scale it under production and have other people join in and the use case expanded, and they said, yeah, great. Now can we change some of the parts, right? This car just has a crash, and then we took 2 cars, merged some of the parts, scrapped, and we took the engine out and moved it. Then we realized when you change the engine of a car, is it still the same car that you have, even though the VIN number has not changed?
It's like if you replace the heart,
yeah,
person, is it the same person?
So, I mean, yes, that would have a lot of ethical issues that we need to talk about it. But in the case of a sort of a inanimate object like a car, then you say, if this car actually change its airbag, that affects the value of the car. It means that the car has an accident. So if I can prove on blockchain that even though the VIN number never changed, and also the airbag number never changed from its original time, I can prove the car never had any serious accident. And therefore the value of the car is maintained. Now, that is why, data is very important. And I know we are running out of time soon, and I want to leave enough time for Q&A. So let me just quickly show you this slide here about aviation. And here we were trying to track a system that can sell an aircraft. That's all the client wanted to do. I own an aircraft and I want to sell it. And people who want to buy it need to be assured that where has it flown, has it been maintained? And then we realized that it's not so easy to prove that the aircraft has been maintained and that all the parts that have changed is original. So we actually had to draw out this conceptual data design. And in doing so, we ended up creating a data structure that went all the way back to the manufacturing of the aircraft. Mm-hmm. First thing we did was we took all the data of an Airbus A320, which has over 2,000 significant components inside there, right? And we ingested it into the blockchain. And then that gave birth to digital twin. So every aircraft that can go through our system will have a digital twin from the time it gave birth. And every time you go through here, the maintenance operator service and replace a part, it goes into the blockchain. It's inside there. Every time you take a flight and you go through an airport and the airport registers that you have landed, it goes into the aircraft. This is where it's been. When you look at it from that perspective, then suddenly you find that where am I going to store all that information? Where am I going to get it? So you'll find that, yes, we will store some of it in the aircraft here because this aircraft landed in Kiev on this date and now there's a timestamp. But where is it going to get it from? it's going to get it from a lot of other systems inside there. Has this aircraft been certified? Where is this flying certification? And we find that having a full data structure from the very beginning helps you manage the scope. So I hope that has been helpful to give all of you an idea of the things that we do in IBM and how we go about doing it using blockchain. And Pavel, shall we leave some time for the people to ask questions?
Yeah, they're asking. I'm asking them to you.
Okay.
So I also wanted to mention in the previous slide here, I saw that identity management was also external to the blockchain system.
Yes.
And as I know, in Hyperledger, you have the identity services embedded.
Yes.
Could you comment on that? What do you mean by identity services and how you see its role?
Yeah. So how we differentiate it is when we talk about identity management, this is your normal set of IaaS systems that clients will use. How you sign into Facebook, how do you do your biometrics, the fingerprint scanners inside. That's the external part, and that is what we mean inside here, inside. Where you are talking about the identity management inside not only Hyperledger, but any other system, is really, you're talking about membership systems. All right, in Hyperledger, we're a permission system. So you need to be able to satisfy the permissions of this person. What is this permission inside? Yes, I know who you are through the identity management, but the membership service controls what you're allowed to do. So I'm only allowed to confirm data or validate data or ingest data or to be able to read. Am I allowed to control enrollment, for example? So who has to say that right now we have a membership of 14 members on this permission network, and number 15 wants to join. Who gets to vote inside there? Or how does the positive vote come? Is it 30% of positive votes means that person come in, or does it need to be more than 50% or 75%? It is a controlling of all of these enrollment and attributes that is in the membership service, as opposed to managing identity, which can be in any other form, sort of a federated identity and others. And we'd love to be able to talk with you guys also about using blockchain for identity management, such as what we're doing in Hyperledger Indy. But I think that would require us to schedule another time and another hour to be able to have the time to talk about that.
This is very interesting. If you have time, we definitely need to do that. Okay. Interesting. And maybe you can enlighten us a little bit about like potential changes in version Hyperledger 3.0. What kind of features do you see are coming and what are needed?
And I think I will have to take a rain check on that because I know the guys are doing a lot of work. So I personally know some of the Hyperledger maintainers inside there, and I'm gonna say I haven't spoken to them in the last two weeks. So, and things change very fast, and also they wouldn't want me to commit too much because it's a lot of approvals inside there. How many of them are voting before the features get confirmed? But for those of you who are very interested, you know, the GitHub does contain a lot of information inside there. So to ask, you know, go check it out on the GitHub and see what are some of the things that they are working on.
Okay, and how do you see like the best application of Hyperledger right now? Like given particular like consensus mechanisms and maybe some tools, what would you say is like the best area for Hyperledger to be used. Maybe, I mean, if you can talk about that in comparison with like Worm or Corda, just like to give a like some competitive advantage of Hyperledger.
Back to answer your first part of the question, right? What is the best use of Hyperledger? And that depends on what this very first slide I showed you. It depends on the industry. So in the consumer goods industry, they are valuing the provenance of the supply chain. So everything that we do there is around the supply chain provenance inside. There's very little use of smart contract. Whereas in the energy and utility, it's about the smart contract because there is just so much transactions, but the transactions are quite flat. So they need to be able to pass through it and have some logic to say when can the transaction connect. So like the example I gave you of buying and selling energy at different prices for the consumer. Right. And over at financial services, it'll differ again based on the use case. Is it things to do with token, or is it to do with bank guarantees? And the very hot topic at the moment in financial services is not about cryptocurrency, but actually about central bank digital currency and how that will impact it. So it depends how it is being used. And back to your second part of your question about the different types of protocol. Every protocol has some of its own advantages, right? Like IOTA is specializing in very small transactions. Hyperledger, we know, it's not very good when you try to use it for dealing with cryptocurrencies because it is a permission network. Therefore, it works better when you're in a closed network, such as supply chains or a network of energy. Right? So you can see all of these kind of specialty coming through already. Where we have had very interesting work is what happens when you need to intersect some of these different networks. Can a Ethereum network talk to a Hyperledger network? And that is something that at IBM, we are focusing some energy in to find out how interoperable are things when you actually have them sitting on different protocols. I can't say that we have the definitive answer, but we have some early information that you would be able to find out upon looking at our IBM literature.
Okay, I have another question in the chat. What do you think about the universal utility of blockchain as a virtual machine for eliminating the transaction costs of institutions related to Ronald Coase theory? I guess it's about like marginal benefits and disadvantages for like individual versus society.
That's a very deep question, but and I'm not quite sure I fully understand what is the context about it. So let me have a try to answer it and see if this is what you're looking for. If not, reach out to me after this, and then we can have another conversation about what it is. So could it become a sort of like a master system to track all the different transactions that is inside? Possibly one day. All right. And right now, what we're finding is pockets of systems. Sorry, just one second. Pockets of system as people learn how to use blockchain. So you see 4 centers of gravity right here already. And what is continuing to happen is transaction data will start to gravitate more and more, and they will work between each others. Where I am not very clear whether blockchain can be the master repository of all data is pertaining to analytical data. And that is where we talked about, we're seeing that it is a split where people are starting to keep off-chain data separate from on-chain data. I hope that is the context that you're looking for, that answer there. If not, reach out to me and tell me a bit more about your question, and I'll see if I can actually give you an answer that satisfies you.
Okay, Winston, I know your time is limited. My final question would be, what do you think, how fast all accounting systems will in certain way use blockchain, and in which maybe stages this integration could happen?
Quite fast, actually. So the example that I showed you for the travel and transport, our integration, the first port of call is actually addressing the way that the accounting system accounts for the revenue and how does it get shared. So that's already how we're building in blockchain in the system. It doesn't mean that we are replacing the accounting system. It just means that blockchain is starting to work directly with the accounting system. And my experience, all the good blockchain systems that are getting the most traction are dealing with the back office.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your time. And if, as I said, if you have more time over upcoming weeks, months, it would be great to have another conversation. I still have many questions, and we haven't even touched digital identity very deeply. And other topics, it would be really interesting to talk to you more.
I hope this has been good for you and good for your community members who've been on the call. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the invitation, and I'll speak with you soon. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you very much, Winston. Yeah, have a good day. Bye. Bye, everyone.